most controversial subjects in modern sports is the use of performance-enhancing drugs or cheating. From sign stealing in baseball and football, encouraging home crowd noise, competitive advantage is an acceptable part of the game. PED use is different. It alters your body chemistry to make good players great and great players immortal. Cheating aside, are we looking at the history and application of steroid use all wrong? Attempting to find any kind of advantage is just part of life. We drink coffee and other caffeinated drinks to help us through long work hours and sometimes grueling commutes. Students use Adderall and other stimulants to help them focus. Classical musicians, professional archers, and golfers use beta blockers to help with focus. How can we discount music's blatant use of drugs when performing? As a fan of heavy music, I've heard many people say that once a certain band that had success and released classic material in various altered states aren't the same when they sober up. We don't view athletic competition in the same way. We become puritanical beacons of fairness and speak of demanding even playing fields. But is this just a lie we tell ourselves or the one we've accepted? A shadowy underground world of illegal steroids. Ever since the death of Mark Jensen, he is the Dutch cyclist who died while competing in the 1960 Olympics from heat stroke exacerbated by alcohol and amphetamine usage. An Olympic committee was formed to try to put an end to doping in the sports. As advancements in medical and pharmaceutical drugs create advantages for athletes, they will continue to take them, and these governing bodies will constantly be one step behind attempting to police it. As for the consumer, the fan of sports, has an attitude shifted when it comes to the way we define cheating and PED use. LeBron James in basketball, Tom Brady in football, players looking better than they did in their 20s, playing at a ridiculously high level into their mid-40s is an astounding achievement. Through years of play, a game can slow down for these top athletes. Prior to this enhanced era of sports, by the time a player had reached a certain mental capacity and processed a nuanced understanding of their opposition, their physical ability wouldn't be up to par with their mental processing prowess. Now that's not the case. Barry Bonds is probably the perfect example of this shift. Already a perennial all-star and possible Hall of Famer, he chose to take PEDs and the results were mind-blowing. In the later stage of his career, he was able to destroy the home run record in baseball and lead the San Francisco Giants to a World Series. Still, steroids aren't a magic pill. You still have to have an ability to play at a high level. Not everyone that took PEDs made an all-star team or broke long-standing records. Many players in all the four major sports were journeymen. That being said, the question remains, is the outrage of athletes and PED use manufactured? What role does the media play in this public indignation of PEDs? The scandalous portrayal of these victimless crimes enables mere beat writers to win prestigious awards and cosplay Woodward and Bernstein level journalism. Sports Illustrated, once a must-read sports weekly with some of the best sports writing, was accused of publishing AI-generated stories and credited writers that weren't real. Sports reporting in the modern 24-hour news cycle can resemble tabloid television more than it can interesting stories on the game itself. Computers can't sift through garbage at Balco Labs, but a journalist can. Steroids, at the moment, are great job security. What role does the Cold War and the war on drugs play in the way we view steroids? Not until the Anabolic Steroids Control Act of 1990 did they become illegal in the United States. So today, we will discuss steroids and fitness influencers, which I think are another big part of this.
Yeah, and I've got some thoughts on that involve two brothers that I don't particularly like from my neck of the woods.
The Pauls?
Yeah.
Oh, they look juiced out as fuck.
Yes, and I'm going to tell you right now, we'll just kick off with that, right? We've got one brother who is going to fight Mike Tyson in Saudi Arabia. And then we have another brother who is the United States champion for WWE, and he wrestles less than Roman Reigns did the last year. Mm-hmm. And those dudes, like you said, they look juiced. They look nice. They are constantly showing their workouts online now. And it's like that's what they've kind of devolved into. They've used their platform to get into places like, you know, the WWE, which people I don't know if any other wrestling fans are here, but we actually have a center ring sponsor now in Prime, right?
Mm.
Uh, because of the Paul connection now, right? But those guys went from just being a bunch of dickheads on YouTube to now they're everywhere. And they're also some of the biggest purveyors of the exploitation of the labor laws in
Mm-hmm.
Puerto Rico as well. But that's another rant for another day. Um, you know, but the fact of the matter is this: it's right. The fitness influencers, I think, now have a bigger effect on what the federal government utilized to pass the Anabolic Steroids Act, which was we don't want kids taking them, right? We
Mm-hmm.
don't want kids to take them. So we have to really crack down on them. We'll make them illegal here. We're going to ensure that these professional sports leagues have a much stricter steroid policy. And we saw how well that actually worked, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not very well. Um, you know, especially when you had guys like Lyle Alzado towards the end of his life
Yeah.
coming out and said, yeah, dude, I juiced into the early 90s. You know, you had Ken Caminiti,
Mm-hmm.
you know, who
The late. Yeah.
maybe even more so than Bonds, uh, only because he was like a middling, he was an average third baseman. And then 1 year,
MVP.
MVP, right?
51 homers, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And he just he and Kevin Brown willed the Padres to that World Series in 96, I believe. 96 or 97, right? So like these guys were flouting the rules, right? And now, you know, people have kind of, you know, a lot of athletes are like, well, we don't have to do that. We can talk about, you know, these athletes who make millions of dollars who have a private chef on hand to cook for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they have the best recovery assets for these athletes, right? But now it's these fitness influencers that are walking around shredded, um, that kids are watching on TikTok, Snapchat, you know, YouTube, all your platforms, you know, that I think are the ones that are kind of like changing people's, especially young people's minds about steroid use, right? It's like that guy who professed that he was all natural and he just had a meat diet. And he's like, and
Liver
he's,
King.
yeah, the
Yeah.
Liver King. And it's like, you know, what is it? Just last year he came out and was like, yeah, man, I've been juicing for like a decade.
He got busted. Yeah, he got busted and had to admit that he was juicing. The influencer culture is interesting because there does a lot of them do stay their natural, right? Women with the most chiseled jaws, pores as big as
Yeah.
goldfish, and they're like, oh no, it's all natural. Um, th- there's also something a little deceptive about the camera from people drawing their abs
Yeah.
with Tanner. Um, that happens to some degree. Also, people that are smaller than you think, and you think they might be juiced and jacked, but they're like 5'8", 150 pounds, just ripped. Because a 5'8", 175 looks way different than
Yeah.
Ronnie Coleman, 5'11", 300 pounds. There's a massive difference. You might
Yeah.
think that guy is the same. It's like he is not the same.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
camera is
And I think
fooling.
what we're seeing a lot of too is the cosmetic, like you
Mhm.
said, you know, we're sculpting our abs through Tanner, and then you have the synthol that people are injecting directly into the muscle to give them more definition. And then you have those idiots, I'm sure you've seen them on the internet, that have overdone it, and it's just like they look goofy,
Like
you know?
loaves of bread in their arm.
Yeah, do they look like they were like put together by twisting long balloons, you know?
Yeah.
Um, you know, and then you have like even more so for people that are juicing and are having issues with like hair retention. You know, they're going under the tattoo gun to have their eyebrows put back on, right? You're seeing a lot of well, mostly female lifters that in order to cover up those big pores, they're having freckles tattooed on them.
I did not know that.
Yeah, you know, so like there's a lot of that going around now, and it does, it goes back to, yeah, exactly, Wiley. Looking like the Michelin Man. um But it does go back to these unhealthy image standards that we have and we've continued to have. And even with this kind of, I like the sea change, and some people just aren't going to carry a ton of muscle. It's just it's not how their genetics are. And the things they would have to do would have to be like, you know you would essentially have to start on your road to become an influencer so you can get paid to stay home, lift, and recover. But there's those body standards are still there, right? And maybe, I don't know how you feel about it, Jason, but I feel like women have had to deal with this since the beginning of time, and now it's starting to catch up to dudes, right? Like, I can't tell you how many of like my army buddies that we put on weight when we get out, because we're just like, we don't have to get up at 4:30 in the morning anymore. PT, no way, bro. Like, and then they put on like 40, 50 pounds, and they're like, man, I remember when I could like wear a 34 jean. I think I'm and then like you're watching a Marvel movie and Chris Hemsworth has no shirt on, and the guy's just like, fuck me, I gotta get to that. And it's like, bro, you can't get to that. And I'm not trying to say that.
Do you think there has been a shift? I would say some people started in the 80s of an unrealistic body shape of men. If you watch movies before, let's say 1984, before Arnold and Sly become like big time box office people in multiple movies, not just Rocky.
Yeah.
But when he's in, a multiple movie star, a
Cobra
bankable,
over the top.
yeah, he's a bankable Hollywood guy, right?
Yeah.
There becomes this moment where dudes are just really, really ripped, especially when we get into the 90s and into the 2000s, definitely. But in the 80s, you see this shift. If you go back and watch movies and look at actors who were leading men, hair was not a big issue, and your physique wasn't a big issue. Gene Hackman, Sean Connery. If we sit here and think about actors in the 70s, us 40-some-year-old guys, I'm sure we can have some. Harrison Ford was never.
Roger Dalton. Like those dudes weren't what you would call like athletic looking, and I mean, and let's face it, Sean Connery, he's got accolades as an actor, but honestly, what got him to stick in American consumers' eyes, honestly, it had to have been the accent, that thick Scottish accent. That's a panty dropper. When they're just like,
Sean Moon says very appropriately, Jack Nicholson. Like,
yeah.
when we think of these like iconic actors that were sex symbols of their day, they don't look like what we end up getting. Let's say it starts with the Brat Pack, and then those guys grow up and they're still looking for the ones that succeed, still look good.
Yeah. I mean, dude, and on top of that, you hit the mid-'80s action film scene, like you said, Arnold, Stallone, Jean-Claude.
Jean-Claude,
Dolph Lundgren, right? These dudes were, they're superheroes taking off
Charles
on the comic book
Bronson.
page. Yeah. I mean, Bronson, dude, I think Bronson was more about attitude. Like he was, you got to admit, he's in good shape. Like he became
great
a star.
Great shape. Yeah.
Later on, when you think about, an actor's typical life cycle. But when you're just running around with a giant magnum shooting bad guys, as a cop, how art imitates life. Am I right? It's kind of nuts, and we did have that shift. And then when you looked at a lot of our favorite athletes at the time, right? These guys were still like smoking in the dugout, like running to the
Fred Dean is smoking on the sideline when he's playing for the Niners in the early 80s still.
Yeah, and that's our athletes were kind of like everymen. And then it's like the 90s hit, and you saw this kind of like, you saw a sea change. We went from Larry Sonka and John Riggins, and then we kind of saw the super athlete with Earl Campbell, who was just freakishly athletic. Like the man was size, speed, agility, all forced into one person. And unfortunately, he played in Houston on the worst playing surface in America, and it just destroyed all his
Who
bones.
needs knees?
Yeah, all his bones are gone. He's just like a big blob now, right?
Mhm.
But especially in the 90s, when you saw guys like Michael Irvin coming out of who, I mean, let's face it, the Canes in the 80s, early 90s, those dudes were, again, pulled off a comic book page. They were
Yeah.
ripped. You know, they made sure they wore crop tops to show off their abs.
Crop
Like when they,
top jerseys. Do you
oh,
remember
yeah.
the crop top jersey? I felt like everybody at the U of M had a
Yep.
crop top jersey.
Even the offensive linemen, they were like, if we're getting in those too, you know, just let it all hang out, you know? They look, Toretta's looking at the center like, bro, I could literally watch the sweat drip into your crack when you're getting ready to snap the ball. Can you just like put a t-shirt on underneath, man? He's like, fuck no, Gino. You can kiss my ass. Yeah.